Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. I am your host, Christine Smith. And it is March, which means it is Women's History Month, which means that we are celebrating women composers. And that means that my most popular guest, Jenny Boster, is back with me today. And she's going to be telling us a few more women composers and female composers that we should be listening to this month, as well as she's going to invite us to join her in her Composers Challenge that she does every year. And I'm just so happy that you've come back and talked with me again, Jenny. If you don't remember, Jenny is a nationally certified teacher of music, and she is the owner of the Playful Piano. It's a blog and online store with all sorts of resources for music teachers and piano teachers. And it also includes her very popular music history series that is called Shades of Sound. And Shades of Sound has the last time I saw it, has some resources specifically for female composers as well. So it's definitely something that you should check out. And with that introduction, welcome to Musicians versus the World, Jenny, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I always love being here. It's so fun to chat about what's happening in the world of female composers.
Yeah. So how has your year been? It's been a year since I've seen you.
It's been a year. I know it's been busy. It's been really busy in life and in my work that I've been doing. It's been good.
Well, I'm so glad that you're doing the Female Composer Challenge again. I'm sure that's just been growing every year that you've been doing it.
Oh
Is
yeah.
this your third year now?
The third year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fun because people tell me how excited they are and they look forward to it all year long, and so it's really fun to come back and introduce a whole new set of female composers. So this year it's all new composers we haven't covered yet. So 31 new ones. So it's really exciting.
So that's amazing. This is your third year doing it. That means that there's been 93 female composers
Yeah.
that we have
And
not heard about.
before that, I had already released my first Shades of Sound Women Composers book, and there were 19 in there, and I haven't covered any of those in the challenge either. So, I mean, some people are like, are there really that many female composers? But there really are. Like, I could keep going, like I'm always discovering new ones. I have a list that I just keep track, and I start making my list for the next year. So it's really fun.
Yeah. Well, and what's exciting for me is that female composers are becoming more represented in repertoire and in just kind of in the media. And so it's been fun because I have this background because of your female composer challenges that I know them. And so when I hear about them, I already have some sort of background to do it.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
exciting when you hear about them. Like at the Grammys, Jermaine Franco won the Grammy, and she was in our challenge last year. She was the composer for the film Encanto.
That's
So it's kind
right.
of fun when you already know their names
Yeah.
to see them doing great things and getting the recognition that they deserve.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, she's not the only one. Who else? I have a list
Um,
here.
I think Caroline Shaw. So
Yeah.
it was her album that was
Mm-hmm.
by a string quartet, but it was all of her music.
Yeah.
That album won a Grammy as well. I think there were some others.
Right. The best orchestral performance was won by the New York Youth Symphony under the direction of Michael Repper, but they performed works by Florence Price, Jessie Montgomery, and Valerie Coleman.
Yeah.
And
So
that's just,
cool.
I know, and that's just in the classical world. That's not even talking about
Right.
pop and
Oh,
country.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So it's
cool.
really, really exciting. Now, you, when we last chatted, you talked about that you have some statistics about the growth of the music that's being performed and scheduled. Do you want to share some of that?
Well, yeah, I haven't looked it up recently, but there was a study that kind of studied all sorts of things recently. And one of the things, I mean, there's more female conductors, which is awesome. One of the cool ones was that 9 out of the 20 most performed living composers are women, which is so cool. It's almost 50%. And so that's not, the historical ones. That's still overwhelmingly men, of course, but that's really exciting that almost half of the living composers, because there's so many women composing today.
Yeah. And also not just women composers, but at the Grammys, Judith Sherman won Producer of the Year for Classical. And it's her 14th Grammy total, but it's her 7th Grammy. yet for producer of the year. So I think just women in the music world in general are really starting to come to the forefront, and it's really exciting because you get a whole different perspective
Oh,
from that.
totally.
Yeah,
Totally. That's
yeah.
so cool.
I love that.
Women just
Now,
have a different, I mean, everybody who composes music and produces music, they have their own life experiences, and that's in the creative arts, that's where you get your inspiration is from your life. So it's so cool. We need, we need that perspective. We need to hear music written by women because it tells a different story.
hmm,
If, for example, can I give you a couple examples of that?
yes.
From the challenge that we're doing this month, a couple from that. So there's a composer named Sally Whitwell, and she's from Australia, and we're going to be listening to one of her piano pieces. It's called Loopy Lady. I really like it. It's really fun, and it has like four movements, and there's kind of like a variety of moods and styles in there. But the inspiration was it's inspired by the kind of the emotions of a teenager. So
Oh,
Loopy Lady, I mean, to capture that teenage girl experience like in music is kind of cool.
yeah.
You're not going to get that from a man, right? You're just not. Another cool thing that I read about one of our other composers is Anne Saldum. She was a Canadian composer. And she was one of my favorites that I learned about this time. And we could even talk about her more later if you want. But she was really into feminism and just trying to get women, representation. In fact, when she passed away, she bequeathed like $14 million to the Canadian Women's Foundation. She was like really into, feminism and all of that, but she wrote a lot of minimalist piano music, and she talked about kind of this analogy that this kind of piano music reminded her of like traditional women's work. Like they're working with their hands, they're sewing, they're cooking, they're chopping things, and how the world can't function without that. And so it was kind of a cool tie-in to her music, which is very repetitive. It's this very minimalist style. So just a couple of little examples where, in the music, we get this feminine perspective, and it's different, it's unique, and we need to hear these authentic voices. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that listening to some more women composers is really helpful for the next generation. I think it's great for people who, are children's age or our students' age. To them it's just normal. So there's no reason why they couldn't do that.
exactly, exactly. That's why I think it's so important. We've talked about this before, I'm sure in the other episodes. It's so important for teachers. Like we're the ones who are going to be kind of shifting the tide. If we can like raise our piano students, our music students, just knowing about these women, then it's going to be a totally different story once that generation has grown up and they are kind of the forefront in the music world. So it'll be
Hmm.
really cool if we can start teaching them about these
Yeah.
women.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So now if you have a top 5 I know you have 31 that we're going to be listening to,
Right.
but
Right.
what are 5 composers that you think that we just cannot go the year 23 without listening to? Who are they?
So do you want ones that are like from this year's challenge or just kind of in general? Because I have okay, that's okay. So and then you have like there's the living ones or just in all of history. Like what do you want? Like what
I love this. This is like my son asking me, "What's your favorite piece of music?" Now I'm like, "What do you mean? Now do you mean like romantic
like
piece of music?
that
Do
is
you
a
mean piano?"
huge yes. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so I tell him like, "Oh no, that's like asking the beach what its favorite grain of sand is. You just can't do that."
Right.
So let's
Okay,
let's narrow it down.
well,
How about okay.
we could go historical first. Like if we
Okay.
go historical, like okay, so for me, I'm a pianist, I'm a piano teacher.
Okay.
Let's go historical. If I had to pick five, like piano, I have a little list here, but I'm trying to narrow it down. Okay. So I mean, okay. I think I really, really love Helene de Montgeroux. She was a French classical era. I think she's really important. She taught about making the piano sing. She was one of the first people to do that, and she has a huge um, um, collection of etudes, and they're awesome. And I think they should be played. So I'm going to say her, um, and I want to say Clara. Everyone would say Clara because they know her. though she doesn't have as much for all levels.
Right.
Her pieces are harder. So
So this is
if
Clara
we're
Schumann, just to be clear, Clara Schumann.
Claire Schumann, yes,
Yeah.
yes, Claire Schumann. Um, I would say Florence Price,
Right.
just because she has so much keyboard music, piano
Right.
music,
Hmm.
um, at all levels. She wrote a lot for her own students. She had a studio, huge studio. She had like 100 students at a time, and she would write music for them. So she has like really easy level teaching pieces, but then she has so much other music at
Yeah.
all the levels.
Yes. And it's easier to find her music now. When we first spoke about her 3 years ago, you had
Mhm.
to go to an archive to find it. And
Yeah,
now you can find
it's a
published.
lot easier. You can find a
Hmm.
lot of them that are like the digital downloads. You can purchase
Right.
them, get them
Hmm.
immediately. You can get them in books. So that's really exciting. How many have I done? Is that 3?
That was three. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I have to say Amy Beach. She's again
Right.
one of the most important. She's one that everybody would say. They would say Amy Beach and Clara. Those are the only 2 they would probably know. I think she's really great for piano music. She was kind of one of the forefront first big female composers in the United States. She's one of,
Hmm.
she's written a lot of really amazing music. Um, which we don't see a lot in anthologies, so
Right.
I would love to see more of her music being played. And if I had to pick one more, oh goodness, Mel Bonis. Mel Bonis,
Yes. Yes.
I love her music. She's from, France, the Romantic era,
Hmm.
and she wrote the most beautiful piano music.
Yeah.
There's so many more I could say.
I
Those are my
know.
historical that I love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, how about from this year? What are some good ones that we should look out
From
for
this
next
year's
year?
challenge. Okay,
Yeah.
from this year's challenge, I love Valerie Capers.
Hmm.
She's a living composer. She's from the United States. Can I tell you a little bit about her? She's
Please do.
amazing. So
Yeah.
she's born in the 30s, in New York City in the Bronx. And so her father was a professional stride pianist, and he was a close friend of Fats Waller, the famous jazz pianist. So she knew him as a young girl. And her mom also played. There was always music all over their piano, and just very musical family. When she was 6 years old, she got a strep infection, and it made her go blind. So because of that, she has had so many barriers to kind of cross in her career, but she ended up getting like a fantastic education at the New York Institute for the Education of the Blind, where she took piano lessons. And she was like the most hardworking, driven student. When she was 12 years old, she would practice like 5 or 6 hours a day. And because of her disability, she would have to once she got to college, she was the first blind graduate of Juilliard. She got a full ride scholarship to Juilliard. She would memorize all her music in the summer because she had Braille sheet music. She would memorize it in the summer. Although now I'm like, did she have Braille that she read from? I know she composed in Braille. I'm sure she must have. I don't know how that works, but she would memorize it in the summer, then learn to play it. Um, and her composition, she doesn't have a huge output because to compose, she would write it in Braille. She would then read it aloud, like on a cassette tape, and record it, like speaking the notes. And then somebody would transcribe it into sheet music. So it was a very
Wow.
logistically like complicated process. But
Yeah.
she has this one, and I actually have it right here. She has this one book, this work for piano called Portraits in Jazz. And she was saying how she loved that, these great composers like Schumann and Tchaikovsky had music they wrote for children, like an album for the young type thing where they could learn, students at a lower level could learn to play that style, and it would sound beautiful and it would sound like that composer. And she wanted to do that for jazz. So after she graduated from Juilliard, she took 2 years off classical music and just immersed herself in jazz and learned jazz. So she is known for her jazz music. A lot of her compositions are for like a jazz ensemble, but this is her work for piano, and I think there's like 12 movements. They're great for students. They're all based off of a different person, a famous jazz musician. So
Oh.
there's one called Ella Scats the Little Lamb, so it's all about Ella Fitzgerald. There's one about Billie Holiday. There's one inspired by Louis Armstrong.
Oh, how fun.
Anyway, they're so fun. So even though that's her only kind of work for piano, I think it's really important because, and her whole thinking also was to help those classically trained piano teachers, give them a
Yeah.
resource that they can introduce their students to jazz. And she includes all these really great performance notes, and it's a really good guide for teachers. So
Oh,
I just thought she was so
yeah.
fascinating. And
That, my goodness, that is such a hard way to compose music. You know, you kind of like if she had been born, just 50 years later, she could use the MIDI keyboard and it would
mhm.
transcribe it for
Oh my
her.
gosh. Exactly, exactly. So, she has a relatively small output, but it's because it was so, complicated to just get the music written down out there. But she was a really, she was on all these faculties. She was a faculty at the Manhattan School of Music, and she introduced jazz to lots of different, curriculums and things. But so I loved learning about her. She was really awesome. We already talked about Anne Southam a little bit from Canada. She
Oh,
actually, yeah,
yeah.
what
No, well, I was just going to say, I looked her up a little bit, and what's really awesome about her is she started out in electronic music,
yes, yeah,
which, yeah, yeah, which is easy now because we have all these like digital,
mm,
audio workstations and things, so it's very easy. But like back then,
back
there were
then it
these
was,
massively huge machines, and it was
yeah,
very technical and
mm,
very almost, oh, it was crazy, and it was very male dominated.
it was
And
very
for
male
her to
dominant.
be so successful in that is really, really something.
It is, and it's really cool because she kind of got her big break because she got into the dance world. She met, somebody who was the head of, and I can't remember, I don't have it written down, but a Canadian dance company, and so they collaborated for years, and she basically made her name in the dance world instead of kind of on the performance stage. But she wrote a lot of electronic music for dance, and there's some really cool interviews that I found. There's a whole album of all about her life with interviews and stuff on Apple Music. You can go find it. It's very cool. But they talked about how all of her music, no matter what style it was, whether it was electronic or then the minimalism that she turned to later,
Hmm.
or she even dabbled in like 12 tone and a little romantic, the kind of like overlying characteristic was lyricism, which I thought was cool. Like,
In
how
12
can you
tone.
compose lyrical electronic music or 12
Right.
tone? But it's true, she has a really authentic kind of sound, and but I love her piano music. It's very cool. She has a few pieces that are kind of, I think they're, I can't remember, they're called they're kind of these preludes that are a little bit jazz inspired also, that are good for students. So she has kind of an eclectic, output, but she's very was very cool to learn about. Um, a couple from some earlier eras. Madalena Casulana was the first. She was from 16th century Italy, and she was the first professional female composer. She was the first woman to get her music published. So she's like the
Really?
earliest published female composer ever. So I thought we need to learn about her. Um,
Yeah.
she, and even all the way back then, she was writing about kind of like the barriers, the gender barriers that she was up against.
Uh-huh.
In one of the dedications to her pieces, I think she dedicated it to Isabella de Medici, and
Hmm.
was talking about how she wanted to show men that women could share equally in this like gifts of intellect. Like, women can do these things too. So all the way back then, she was trying to break down those barriers.
So what was that was your second or was that your third one? That was your
That
third
was
one.
my third one.
Yeah.
And let's go a little bit later, 18th century England. There's a composer named Gamberini, Elisabetta Gamberini, and she was the first British woman to publish like a collection of keyboard music. So she actually, I've seen her a lot in anthologies of female composer works for younger students for the lower levels. She has like some minuets and things that are really great. That would be a really good art alternative to like the Anna Magdalena notebook pieces. And she died really young, like at age 35. So it would have been interesting to see what else she could have done. But I included her because I thought she was important because I've seen her a lot in these anthologies that are coming out, and she's so so that's really exciting. And then My last one I wanted to share, I wanted to share a romantic era composer. So Pauline Viardot was a French composer in the 19th century. She was mainly a singer. She was known as, she was a famous opera singer. I think she was a mezzo soprano. But she also studied piano with Liszt. Like she was very talented. And as a singer, she actually traveled to Russia, and she was like the first foreigner to sing in Russian. So she was just very well known, very famous. In fact, Berlioz said that Madame Viardot is one of the greatest artists in the past and present history of music. So she was also admired by Chopin and Liszt. She was just very famous in her day. Yeah, and so she wrote a little bit for piano. So we're during the challenge, we're going to be listening to one of her piano pieces. So
Mhm.
kind of uh, a large scope there in those five composers, a big
Yeah.
variety, but it's so fun to
Yeah.
explore new kinds of music and hear what they all have to offer.
Yeah. And I think that there are some real learning experiences. Like you said, that there were some um, that composed minuets. The one I'm thinking of that you actually sent to me that I was really impressed with was Helen Hopkirk, the Scottish composer.
Yes. Yes.
She has this whole suite of dances. Even though she was, the turn of the century, late 19th century, early 20th century, she has a whole suite full of like a minuet, and it starts with a saraband and things like that. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is. I have students that are like, no, I just don't like Baroque music. I'm not going to play Baroque music. I can't do it. But hers uses those same like the same forms and the same dance styles, but it's in a more romantic sort of harmonies. And so I'm totally, completely using it as like a bridge,
Awesome.
you
Yeah,
know.
she's another one. There's so many I'm excited about.
I know.
I'm really excited about her. Her piano music is beautiful.
Yeah.
She was a contemporary of Amy Beach. Like she's from Scotland, but she moved to America and she lived in Boston. So I'm sure
Mhm.
they rubbed shoulders and kind of knew each other, but she's the one that I'm really excited about too.
Yeah. I listened to her piano concerto in D minor. I think I'm just looking at my notes. I think it's D minor. And I think that needs to be put on the National Federation of Music Clubs. It needs to be put on that list
I haven't
because
listened to that one yet. I'll have to go
it
listen.
is, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. It has it's somewhat reminiscent of Rachmaninoff a little bit, but not quite. It is it's a little bit different, obviously, but it's beautiful, and I can imagine that some students would really connect with that really, really well. Maybe if their hands aren't big enough to play Rachmaninoff, it might be
Right.
a
More
good, you know,
accessible. Yeah,
yeah, a little bit more
totally.
accessible for us, for
Totally.
we little handed
Yeah,
people.
exactly. Exactly.
Now, okay, I know you've told me this before, but now we're going on like 93 composers. How are you finding these new composers?
I listen a lot. I listen on Apple Music a lot. So I find like albums, like a lot of people will do albums. There's a lot lately of just full of music by female composers. So it'll have a collection. Some of them I find on there. Some of them I find I'm in a couple of Facebook groups about women composers, and so I'll just screenshot them. I just kind of keep a running list um, as I go, and I have a lot of books too. I mean, there's not as many books about female composers as just as the male composers, the traditional music history books, but there's so many that I could explore still. In fact, it was one of the things I've been doing this year was I decided to create a female composer club, kind of a composer of the month club for music teachers, and I'm really excited about it. We can chat about it if you want, but one person commented to me when I started it. She's like, "This is so great, but how many months will you really have material for?" And I was like, "Oh, I could do this for like 7 years already just with the ones I've already researched and learned about, and I'm finding new ones all the time." So I think there's this misconception that there's not that many, but there's so many
Hmm.
composers out there.
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
and you
let's
know where
talk.
else I
Oh,
find them? Sorry
what?
to yeah, I just
No.
Instagram, like social media, the living composers today, they'll have
Mm.
Instagram accounts, and I find some of them that way. So, just, going on social media, you see them post videos of them playing their music and things like that. So that's
Yeah.
another great way to
Yeah.
discover.
That's really exciting. I think that's just fantastic. I think it's fantastic that what you're doing. So tell me about this Composer of the Month club that you've got going on. Yeah.
Yeah, so my whole, like, belief is that if the music teachers can teach, today's musicians, young musicians, about female composers, then I think that can help to change the narrative a little bit. So I decided to create this. It's like a Composer of the Month club. So every month, it's just $5 a month, and so teachers can join. And every month, I send them a studio license PDF with just tons of resources about one composer. So we we started in November, so we've done it for about 4 months already, and I'm loving it. It's so much fun. So I include things kind of for every age level. So there's something for everybody. They can kind of choose between. There's some coloring pages for younger students. There's a really just kind of easy to read bio sheet about their life, kind of with bullet points and little pictures that goes with it, so they can just learn about the composer. There's a worksheet that they can fill in, and the worksheet and the bio go together. And there's one piece with kind of listening prompts telling them what to listen for. So that's great for the older students who can read that, and they can listen and, kind of record their reactions to the music. Um, and I always include recommended listening lists with playlists and recommended piano pieces for students, kind of in order of difficulty. So teachers have a resource of where they can get the music and what music is good, for their students, because it's still really hard to find music. Um, I was at my state music teacher conference last in November, and I had a booth with my books, and things, and right next to me was a big music store's booth, and I overheard a woman ask him, "Do you have any female composer music?" And he was kind of like, I don't know. And she was trying to explain to him, and he wasn't like, they didn't have any. They didn't really have any. And so I said, "Come here," and so I showed her, and I showed her this page. And so included in this club is the page, and I will update it as new things come out. A page with all of the anthologies you can find, where to find their music, because it's still difficult. You can't just go to a music store because there's not that demand. So hopefully this helps educate the teachers too, and helps them to be able to explore their music and find out what they want and what they want their students to learn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think it would be good to get these in some of the auditions lists as well. Like if we get into
yes.
Federation or
Mhm.
ABRSM or RCM or any of those things, I think that's a really good way to push and to kind of push that
Yes.
along a little faster.
And I haven't explored those a lot to see how many are in now. I know that my state, the Utah UMTA has AIM, the Achievement in Music program, and they actually contacted me last year because they were trying to add female composers to their list. So I was able to help them. I gave them a list of recommendations, and so I thought that was awesome. So I think we're making strides, and we're getting people interested in it, and wondering about it. And so it's great that I can hopefully help them, point them in the right direction of where they can find the music, and help them teach about these composers to their
Mm.
students.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what do you think is probably the easiest way um, for teachers to incorporate all of this listening and all of these biographies and music history? What's like the easiest way to put that into their lessons?
Um, it depends. I know some just, the coloring pages are great for sending home. We don't have a lot of time as piano teachers in lessons. We run out of time so quickly. I have greater success doing these kinds of things in group classes, in a group setting. That's a great way to do it. If you have a monthly group class, or, however you structure your lessons, that's a great way to do it. Some teachers have, um, a separate listening lab, or, a separate, some kind of component of their lessons, where students could do this very well. Um, but yeah, the composer club is laid out as, there's things you can send home, and depending on their age, that they can take home and do. But yeah, it just kind of depends. And they're great for a classroom setting as well. So this resource would be great for classroom teachers, even homeschool parents who want to teach their kids about music history. Um, yeah, it just kind of depends on the setup of your studio.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice for everybody. I love it. Thank you for coming and talking with us. So, how do we find you and how do we become part of the Female Composers Club?
So I'm on Instagram at the Playful Piano. My website's theplayfulpiano.com. And so you can just go to Instagram and there are links all over there how you sign up for the challenge. And you can also find me at femalecomposerclub.com. That's how you join the Female Composer Club. And if you do go join the challenge this month, you actually get a free Female Composer Club pack. And it's all about Anne Salvum. So it's totally free. So you can learn all about her. It was so fun to put together and learn about her life. But yeah, you can find me on Facebook too. So
Yeah.
Playful Piano.
Perfect. Oh, and I'll have links to all of this in our show notes so that everyone
Awesome.
everyone
Awesome.
can find it. So, well, Jenny, thanks so much. It was so good to see you again.
See you always.
Yes, of
Catch up
course.
so often.
Yeah, I know. It's so far away, just
Yep.
totally across the country. But
Exactly.
I
Yep.
love this female composers and all of these challenges that you do. It's really great, and I've learned so much from it. So I really appreciate it. So.
Oh, thanks so much.